I'm Sherilyn Skolnicki, and this is Brilliant Balance, the show for working women who are ready to shine. Each week, I bring you ideas, inspiration, and insight on balance, business, and getting it all done gracefully. You ready? Let's be brilliant. This is episode 206, 3 Things We Need to Teach Our Girls. So to get me started today, I wanted to say thank you to someone who interviewed me recently. And this was a very special interview. I've had the chance to do many podcast interviews in the last year or so, and they've been great. I've been, invited to do like roundups where there's interview series and they get shared out. And I love all of them. I really am so grateful always to be invited to share my message with someone else's audience. But this one was particularly special to me because this was someone who had been a coaching client a few years ago who reached back out because her life has continued to take leaps forward. And she has recently founded an organization for young girls as a resource to help equip them and inspire them and provide community for young girls. And she asked me to come and be interviewed for that group. And it was so wonderful to reconnect with her and just see her beaming and thriving and to relive the many steps that she had taken in her career to get to that point. And in this interview, she read a quote that I have heard before, but had not thought about in a while. And it really inspired this episode. So I want to say thank you to Tokes for giving me the opportunity to be interviewed by her and for inspiring this episode, which I'm calling 3 Things We Need to Teach Our Girls. So here's the quote. I'm going to read it to you. It's a little bit long, so settle in and enjoy it. And this is from Courtney Martin. She says, "We are the girls with anxiety disorders, filled appointment books, 5-year plans. We take ourselves very, very seriously. We are the peacemakers, the do-gooders, the givers, the savers. We are on time, overly prepared, well-read and witty, intellectually curious, always moving. We pride ourselves on getting as little sleep as possible and thrive on self-deprivation. We drink coffee, a lot of it. We're on birth control, Prozac, and multivitamins. We are relentless, judgmental with ourselves and forgiving to others. We never want to be as passive-aggressive as our mothers, never want to marry men as uninspired as our fathers. We are the daughters of the feminists who said, 'You can be anything,' and we heard, 'You have to be everything.'" Well, let that settle into your bones, my friends. That is Courtney Martin, and I would say this is the story of us. This is the story of our generation, and honestly, it's not pretty. And our girls are watching. And I think the question is, are we setting an example that they would want to emulate? And for a lot of us, the answer is maybe not so much. As I look at how we can maybe untangle ourselves from the twisted messages that we internalize. We internalize the message, you have to be everything, just like Courtney says in her quote. But how do we untangle that and really hear it the way it was intended, which is you can be anything? I am trying to walk this path myself so that I can model it for my own girls, and I want to help you model it for the girls in your life. Because as much as we wish that they would do what we say, the truth is our actions speak far louder than words, and they're watching our every move. So when I read that quote, I wonder what part of it really stuck out to you. What phrase is kind of still ringing in your ears or rattling around in your mind? As I reflect back on that quote, I really heard echoes of 3 themes. And these are themes I've been noticing as the skills that we seem to struggle with as adult women today. And these are the same challenges that we are really in danger of passing on to our girls if we don't change some things, if we don't learn some lessons. So what are those lessons? What do we need to learn first ourselves and teach to our girls? I'm going to talk about 3 of them in this episode. The first one is choice making, right? Courtney says a couple of things. Quote, "We pride ourselves on getting as little sleep as possible and thrive on self-deprivation." She says, "We are the daughters of the feminists who said you can be anything, and we heard you have to be everything." So choice making is something we are just flat out bad at, right? We want it all. We want it all at the same time, and we want it without trade-offs. But learning to make choices it's the foundation of everything that we want. It is the foundation of who we want to be, right? We need to learn things like saying yes to one thing means saying no to something else. We feel like we live in this and world where it's all additive and we can just keep cramming stuff into these overstuffed suitcases of our lives, and we cannot, right? We need to get better at things like endings, at quitting some things as a way of creating space. And we resist quitting, boy, with everything we've got. We need to show ourselves, teach ourselves how to do this so that we can show our girls, because they have choices to make. Choices about which classes do they take as they get into high school and beyond? Which clubs do they sign up for? Which sports teams do they participate in? And how robustly? Are they going to be on club teams or school teams or rec teams? Which other activities they use to fill their time? Do they have a job or not? Are they volunteering or not? Are they having family dinners with us or not? And we can show them how to curate their time, leaving breathing room and white space for just downtime and dreaming. But first, we have to learn how to do that for ourselves. So that's the first skill, the first thing I think we really need to be mindful of learning so that we can turn and teach our girls. And if of all three that I'm going to share today, I think this is the hardest one. We really struggle with this as a generation of women. And if you're listening today thinking, yeah, I really am trying to teach my girls that, but I'm not necessarily modeling it myself, let that be a wake-up call. Let that be like, let the red flag go up and pay attention to where can I learn it, model it, and then actually talk about it. Because that's the next level, is where can you make a choice to say, I am not going to do this thing, or I am intentionally going to do, this thing, which means by definition, I'm not going to do this other thing. How can you have a conversation about that, the process you used to make that choice with the girls in your life so that they can learn from it, that they can see that it was in fact a conscious choice and not just something that happened. Okay, that's the first thing I think we need to learn and then teach. Do you ever find yourself saying, I just need a minute to breathe? While the whole idea of meditation can sound totally intimidating, I've found that stepping away from the chaos of life, even just for a few minutes, is incredibly restorative. So if you're short on time, but could use a few moments of peace right about now, listen to my 5-minute meditation for working moms. It'll help you clear your head and come back to your day feeling centered and refreshed. Head over to brilliant-balance.com/breathe. Press play and settle in for a few mini moments of peace right now. The second thing is imperfect action. Courtney says in the quote, "We are the girls with anxiety disorders, filled appointment books, 5-year plans. We take ourselves very, very seriously." Indeed, we do, right? As I sometimes call myself the president of the Recovering Perfectionist Club. I get it. We never feel good enough. So what do? We hustle for worthiness. That's a Brené Brown sentiment that I just love because it's so descriptive of the pattern I see us caught in. We hustle and do more. Why? So that we feel worthy. So we think everyone else will deem us worthy. But there is so much power in imperfection. And beyond that, there's so much efficiency to be gained through imperfection. Doing things perfectly takes time, lots of extra time that we do not have. And getting things good enough really can sometimes feel better. It can feel more natural, more relaxed, right? When we start to get comfortable with the idea of imperfection, there's so much freedom in it. But there's also so much fear when we're starting on that journey. right? So imperfect action is about starting and finishing things in new ways. Hear me out on this. Perfectionism can make us afraid to start something. We can be afraid to start. We can't summon the courage to start it. Why? Because we don't think we'll do it perfectly. So the only way to avoid that discomfort is just not to do it at all, right? If I can't do it perfectly, I won't do it at all, sort of the perfectionist credo. The other place we get in our own way is we're afraid to call it done. We're afraid to say, this is good enough. Imperfectly, but good enough, so that we can move on and not obsess over how much better it could have been, or worse, redo it, right? Sometimes we polish that rock until it is long since past the point of being effective. So imperfect action is about having the courage to start something, even though it might not be perfect, and knowing when to call it done so that we can move on and reclaim that time for other things. So how do we show this to our girls? Well, we can show them this in, for example, the way that they study for a test or the way they complete a project. Have you ever caught yourself really urging them to keep perfecting some element of that project? Or maybe you could just study even longer. Are we potentially reinforcing that level of perfectionism when there are clearly diminishing returns at some point in that process? We can show them this by encouraging them to try out new things, to try on a new interest for size, like music or art or a sport. And if you have even young girls and tweens who are saying, but it's too late for me, I can't start because everyone else started when they were 4. And they're experts at this sport or this musical instrument by now. How could I start now? We really want to encourage them to continue to try new things, even if they're not perfect, even if they're not the best one on the team or in the club or in the organization. So that tension between excellence, right? We want to do great work and turn in work we're proud of, and we want to continue to refine our craft and learn to be better at it. The tension between that and where it sort of careens over the edge into perfectionism is a line that we're all trying to find. I'm trying to find it every day. I'm trying to help my girls find it in their own ways. But this is a really critical skill to teach because it can lead so quickly to high anxiety. The desire to be perfect, the need within us to get everything perfect can just keep us so amped up all the time that we never really learn how to relax or how to have downtime. And we all know how important that is. We just want to make sure we're walking the talk. Okay, so the first one I talked about today, first thing we want to teach our girls after we learn it ourselves, is choice making. The second one is imperfect action. What's the third? The third is self-compassion. Here's the quote from Courtney. We are relentless, judgmental with ourselves, and forgiving to others. And this may be the biggest lesson of all, right? Why are we so hard on ourselves? We are harder on ourselves than we would be on anyone else. We give ourselves no credit for effort or progress. And I see it every day play out in my life. This Sunday, my daughter finished like this blaze of work, just did all kinds of things for school and checked off a bunch of check marks on her to-do list. And yet at the end of the day, she's saying, I could have done this one more thing. I didn't get to this one thing that maybe I could have also squeezed this in. And of course, I gently chastise her, praising what she did do, reminding her that it's enough. But that's easy because I am exerting or I'm communicating compassion for her. But am I modeling it? Because later that night, I found myself saying the exact same thing to myself. I'm sort of tidying up on Sunday evening saying, well, this is still undone and I didn't get to that. And really saying I didn't get enough done. So it's so tempting to be hard on ourselves. And we have to really dig for that level of self-compassion. It comes more easily when we're finding compassion for others. I bet you're great at it when you're trying to find compassion for someone else. But when we need to find it for ourselves, it's like we don't qualify. We aren't worthy of compassion. So we can talk to our girls about this when we hear them being hard on themselves, about not getting something right, about what else they could have done, or all of the rumination about what they should have done or could have done differently, about making a mistake, they are growing up in an era where they feel very little room for error, right? Our cancel culture, you can't get it wrong once. You have to agree completely and fully and get it exactly right every time. So do not think for a second they're not paying attention to that, right? We can talk to our girls about self-compassion when they are experiencing regret, when they are thinking back on how something unfolded and telling themselves how stupid they are and how they could have done it differently. And we can explain to them how normal that sentiment is, how it's healthy to look back on your day and say, yeah, there's a few things in there that I would have done differently. And that's called life. And now I'm going to move on to tomorrow and I'm going to give it another go. And it is so important that we give ourselves that same exact grace. And here's the thing. If we don't get good at this, if we don't get great at this, at these three things, we don't stand a chance of changing the course that our girls are on. Because choice making and imperfect action and self-compassion, these are the underpinnings of being able to be anything you want to be without feeling the pressure of having to be everything. We want to be masters at these things. We want to be modeling them day in and day out, talking about them, catching ourselves when we're not doing them well and calling ourselves out so that we can teach through that process. And being able to do that is not easy. I wrestle with these every day myself, and I'm sure that you do too. So being able to adopt these practices may require you to make some behavioral changes. And I don't want that to scare you. I want you to embrace that as this is an opportunity for growth. It's an opportunity to be better tomorrow than you are today and to change the model that you're setting for the girls around you. In fact, next week, I'm bringing you an expert on that very subject. Dr. Katie Milkman is the author of How to Change. She's also the host of the excellent podcast Choiceology and a professor at the University of Pennsylvania Wharton School. So she is joining me in next week's episode to talk about how to change and why it's sometimes so hard. So if you listen today thinking, I have work to do here, but boy, I'm a little doubtful of my ability to execute it, do not miss this episode. It's going to be a great conversation with Katie next week. In the meantime, come follow along on Instagram. We're at brilliant_balance, or join the party on Facebook. That is in the group called Brilliant Balance. Just search groups for Brilliant Balance and you'll find us. That's where you'll find video broadcasts from me, as well as our free workshops. We host about one a month, and an exceptional community of women that you can connect with. So that's all for today, my friends. Until next time, for you and your girls, let's be brilliant.
This is thepodcastfactory.com.